My name is Frederick Rawski. I am currently the Director of Asia and Pacific Programs for the International Commission of Jurists. That means I have responsibility for the ICJ's work throughout the Asia and Pacific region, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific as well. And we work on the entire range of human rights, rule of law, and justice issues that you might encounter through the region. My past experience is as a lawyer, as a human rights lawyer.
What is the achievement of ICJ?
Well, we work across, as I mentioned, the whole array of human rights issues. So we work on issues of accountability for international crimes and human rights violations and human rights abuses that occur during conflict. We work with human rights defenders who are under pressure by authorities or by non-state actors when they're doing their work or under threat. We work with governments as well, and we work with particularly justice sector actors. We work with judges and lawyers, judiciaries throughout the region, including Supreme Courts, prosecutors and investigators that are looking into human rights violations, legislators who are seeking to pass laws to protect human rights. So there's a wide range of work we've done, and at a country by country basis, we've achieved a lot, but never alone. Usually in partnership with national human rights defenders, we've managed to make improvements in the legal frameworks to bring what we call public interest litigation or strategic litigation in the courts to improve the legal framework or the implementation of human rights law in different countries. And we also help to facilitate lawyers and human rights defenders to meet with their colleagues in different parts of the world and to engage with international mechanisms such as the United Nations and related mechanisms.
And human rights idea actually came from the Western side before it came to Asia. Just my opinion. And do you find any limitations or any challenge?
Well, first I would push back against your analysis to start with. I don't think, and the ICJ doesn't think that human rights are Western values or Western derived. In fact, as a factual matter, states in the developing world and in Asia have been very involved from the very beginning in the establishment of the international legal frameworks and human rights frameworks that exist. So I think it's often used as a bit of rhetoric by governments in the region to push back against the implementation of human rights, that this is a Western imposition. But historically, I really don't think that's true. And in addition to that, the values that appear in the main international human rights instruments, I think by and large are values and principles shared across the world by everyone. There may be some nuances and exceptions from place to place, depending on the political or social, cultural context. But really the fundamental rights that we all value, in my experience, are shared by everyone, including human rights defenders in every country of Asia, including largely government officials as well. In our experience, the pushback against human rights is often not value-based. It's a strategic, maybe cynical pushback by people in power who fear that human rights will limit or constrain their power. So so I really think human rights is a global initiative. It's not Asian, it's not Western. Especially now, many of the human rights issues that we face and have to deal with in Asia are common to Europe, they're common to North America, they're common to Africa, they're common to South America. So I think I don't talk of Asian human rights problems or European human rights problems. They're really, especially in this very interconnected world we live in, are common global problems. That's not to say there aren't specific issues in Asia and ASEAN in particular. You know, the ASEAN Declaration, Human Rights Declaration, is problematic from a number of points of view. It imposes limitations on the interpretation of international human rights law that is troublesome and makes it a bit more difficult to engage in human rights advocacy from time to time in ASEAN than it would be in other parts of the world. But those are challenges that we're happy to face.
Promoting the human rights in Asia.
Sure. Well, we try to contribute in different ways. One way is on a technical legal side. That's the real expertise of the ICJ, I would say. We're lawyers for the most part, international lawyers, and our contribution is often contributing legal analysis to a particular human rights issue, assessing a national law or a policy as to whether it's in compliance with human rights obligations and values. So this is one bit of technical assistance that we can give to civil society, to governments, to lawyers, bar associations, judiciaries that are dealing with the intricacies of human rights law. Public awareness and public education around human rights. That can mean public programs, it can mean press work and media work on human rights issues. It can mean supporting the initiatives of other organizations, particularly regional and national organizations who are seeking to engage the public on human rights issues. Often there's a gap between kind of human rights law, as lawyers talk about it, and the understanding of those principles by the general public. But I find that when we bring together those communities of people, it's very easy to see that we're all talking about the same thing, but a little bit differently. So while lawyers may talk about international covenants and human rights instruments, or national laws or constitutions, people at the public at large, or people at the community level, also understand all of those concepts. They may articulate them differently as community values, or social values, or religious values, or cultural or political values that they have. So it's a big challenge all around the world to communicate what human rights and the rule of law means broadly to the broader public. And I think it's essential that we succeed in doing that. In some small part, the backlash against human rights, the rise of popular authoritarianism, ethno-nationalism, I think in part comes from a kind of misunderstanding and lack of knowledge about the human rights frameworks and the efforts that are made to address people's suffering.
What do you think, or what do you see in the future that's coming about the trend of the human rights in the futures?
Yeah, well, most human rights lawyers and human rights defenders now will tell you that we're entering a difficult period. It feels like there's a rise in authoritarian government. Civic space is shrinking in many countries. Religious, ethnic conflict feels like it's on the rise. Political rhetoric is getting much more discriminatory and aggressive. So I think we are in a phase at the moment where many of us feel that human rights values are under attack. We need to unite together and support them and defend them. On the other hand, I think we're also in a transitional period where the world is becoming a much more interconnected place. The world is smaller than it's ever been because of information technology and social media and an integrated economy. So that I really think it's inevitable that our solutions that we will find to address human rights violations, economic and social and cultural rights violations, poverty, climate change, that these will have to be addressed at a global level, across countries, by multiple governments, by people reaching across borders, by looking at legal solutions that extend across larger parts of the world. So in that sense, I'm actually very optimistic. I think that the relevance of the international law framework, and particularly the international human rights framework, is more important than ever.
Kind of the country cooperation. What is the level of cooperation, and do you think it's a challenge to show your work?
In terms of human rights engagement, it is definitely a challenge in ASEAN and in South Asia, because these regions do not have robust regional human rights institutions. You have the European Court of Human Rights in Europe, you have the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in the Americas. You don't have anything equivalent to that in Asia. So in that sense, it's more difficult to engage at a regional level. Also, particularly in Southeast Asia, it's such a diverse region. I mean, in terms of politics, government, religion, ethnicity, culture. which also, of course, means that you need to be sensitive to the specific context in each country, in each place that you're working, and does pose challenges for working across borders. All of that said, though, I think, as you've mentioned, politics, economy, technology are uniting us, and that trend will not stop. And we will only become closer and closer. Communities in different countries will only become closer and closer. And so we really try wherever we can to support human rights activists, NGOs, civil society, government officials on occasion to reach out across national borders and see if there are solutions to issues that can be aided by collaborating with other countries and other regions. And as an international organization, and an organization that has a presence throughout Asia, we like to try and play that role. We like to try and see if we can facilitate those sorts of engagements across countries.
So then, thank you so much for your precious time today. I mean, it's really hard to set the time because I know you're also busy, and it's a really pleasure. I thank you as a CPG officers. Thank you so much for being with us today.